When I woke up at 1:37 a.m., the house was silent. No creaking pipes, no humming electronics, just the low murmur of the heater and Lena's soft, rhythmic breathing. She was asleep next to me, turned toward the wall, one arm tucked under the pillow. At first, everything seemed normal, but something felt off. It wasn't a noise or a smell, more like a shift in the air, a quiet wrongness. That kind of feeling you get when you walk into a room and know someone's been there, even if everything looks the same. My eyes adjusted to the dark, and I glanced around. Then I saw them. A pair of black high-heeled shoes sat beside her dresser. I blinked a few times, trying to remember. Had she worn those today? I was almost sure she hadn't. She had that morning conference, and she'd left in her usual gray slacks and her low black pumps, the comfortable ones with the rounded toe. She hates heels. She says they make her knees ache. But these weren't just heels. They were tall, slim, expensive-looking, a glossy black finish with a gold accent buckle across the toe. I slid out of bed as quietly as I could and crouched near them. I hadn't seen these in months, maybe over a year. She'd worn them once, for a friend's engagement party. Back then, she'd complained the entire Uber ride home about how her feet felt like bricks. She even said she might toss them out. But apparently she didn't, and she hadn't mentioned digging them out for today either. Something didn't add up. I opened the closet slowly, carefully, and there they were, her usual black pumps side by side, right where she always kept them. So if those were in the closet, what were these doing here? I stood there for a moment, just staring at them. They weren't dirty. No smudges or grass stains. Just a faint crease in the toe box and that familiar little scuff on the left heel. Not new, not forgotten. Chosen. When I climbed back into bed, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling until dawn. In the morning, Lena acted like everything was fine. Like there hadn't been a quiet shift in the fabric of our lives while we slept. She made coffee, scrolled through her phone, hummed a little tune I didn't recognize. I waited until she finished brushing her hair to bring it up. "You wore those heels last night?" I asked, nodding toward the door. She followed my gaze. Her eyes landed on them for half a second too long before she laughed. "Oh yeah," she said, brushing it off. "I had them at the office. Just felt like switching things up after dinner. You know me, always forgetting to change before I leave." I raised an eyebrow. "You keep heels like that at the office?" She shrugged. "A spare pair, in case of emergencies, presentations, stuff like that." I let the silence stretch just a second longer than usual to see if she'd fill it. She didn't. Instead, she sipped her coffee and smiled like it was all perfectly ordinary. Her tone was light, but her shoulders were a little too still. Her voice was just a little too smooth, and maybe I'm imagining it, but it wasn't indifference I heard in her voice. It was defensiveness. She'd never been defensive about shoes before. After she left for work, I stood in the hallway and stared at those heels again. They were still there, sitting just inches from the front door. I didn't move them. I didn't put them away. I just left them there exactly as they were. Not to be petty, not to provoke her, just to remind her, gently, silently, that I saw them, that I noticed, that I was paying attention. For the rest of the day, I couldn't stop thinking about that moment. I played it back in my mind on a loop. How natural her voice sounded, and yet how unnatural her story felt. It was subtle, but something in the explanation didn't quite sit right. Like a puzzle piece that clicks into place but shows the wrong picture. I went about my day, tried to keep my mind off it, ran errands, answered emails, ate lunch and barely tasted it. But I kept coming back to the same thought. Why lie about something so small, unless the truth was worse? Late that afternoon, I walked into the closet again and stared at her shoes. All her regular ones were lined up. Flats for commuting, the modest pumps for work, even a pair of old sneakers she used for errands. But those tall black heels hadn't been part of her rotation in a long time. I checked her overnight bag, empty. Her gym tote, same. Then I found something I hadn't noticed before. A receipt, folded and tucked into her coat pocket. Dry cleaning, picked up yesterday. 2 items, a blouse and a blazer. neither of which she wore yesterday morning. I put the receipt back exactly how I found it. That night, I didn't say anything else. We ate dinner, watched TV, pretended everything was normal. She laughed at a sitcom we used to love. I nodded along, barely hearing it. She didn't mention the heels again. Neither did I. But I didn't forget them. And I didn't stop noticing the way she sat with her legs tucked tightly under her, as if she were trying to hide from something. The way she reached for her phone and tilted the screen away from me as she typed. The way her smile never quite reached her eyes anymore. It was small. All of it was small. But it was also enough. Because the thing about trust is, it doesn't usually shatter all at once. Cracks. And those shoes? They were the first crack I could actually see. I tried to move on from the shoes. I told myself it was nothing. A pair of heels, a rushed morning, a forgotten change after a dinner she probably didn't even enjoy. But my brain wouldn't let it go. That little click of something not fitting had triggered a domino I didn't even realize was there. And once one fell, the rest followed. Because suddenly, everything that had felt random, scattered, explainable, started lining up like a pattern I'd been too distracted to notice before. It started with time. Lena used to get home like clockwork. 6:15 p.m. latest. We'd joke about how predictable she was, how I could set my watch to her car pulling into the driveway. But over the last few months, that rhythm had shifted. First it was a late meeting. Then it was crazy traffic, even when the roads were clear. Some nights she'd walk in close to 8, muttering apologies, saying something about a last-minute email chain or quarterly crunches. But the thing is, she didn't look stressed when she walked in late. She looked energized, alive, almost glowing. I remember one night, maybe 3 weeks ago, she came home late, and I noticed her perfume first. It wasn't the one I'd bought her last Christmas. It was something sweeter, more expensive, something that lingered in the air for hours after she'd passed through. I'd asked her about it, and she waved it off, saying her old one had been discontinued. "No big deal," she said. "Just trying something new." Back then, I believed her. Why wouldn't I? But now that scent is etched in my memory like a warning label. Then there was the blouse. She came home one evening and went straight to the laundry room. She peeled off her work blouse and stuffed it into the washer without her usual routine. Lena's a neat freak. She separates whites from colors like it's religion. But this time, she didn't even check the tag. Just shoved it in, slammed the door, and set it to cold. I'd stood there in the hallway, watching from the shadows, something in my chest tightening. I asked her if everything was okay. She said she spilled coffee on herself in a client meeting and didn't want it to stain. Seemed reasonable, innocent. But then why did I see her drink tea every morning? And why was there no visible stain? Another time, about a month ago, she minimized a chat window on her laptop so fast it was almost funny. I walked into the room to grab my phone charger, and she practically jumped. Said she was working on a private HR case, something confidential. I didn't push, but I started remembering the little things she used to share with me. Gossip from work, random frustrations, inside jokes about her coworkers. Lately, that had all vanished. She stopped telling me things. Or maybe she was telling someone else. The more I thought about it, the more it felt like I'd been asleep in my own life. Like I'd been trusting on autopilot, assuming things were fine because Lena still kissed me goodbye in the mornings and asked if I wanted anything from the grocery store. But trust doesn't always disappear in a dramatic moment. Sometimes it fades without you realizing it, until one day, you wake up and realize you've been squinting through fog for months. And then, there was the party. The corporate event she said was going to be boring as hell. I offered to come with her, but she said it was just employees, no plus ones. When she came home, she was in a great mood. Giddy, almost. I thought maybe they'd served champagne. She smiled more that night than I'd seen in weeks. But the thing I couldn't forget was the lipstick. She had a fresh swipe on when she left. A deep wine-red shade I hadn't seen before. When she came back, the color was different. Subtler. As if she'd wiped it off and applied something softer. It was only noticeable around the edges, where the darker pigment still lingered near the corners of her mouth. And then there was the jacket. It wasn't hers. At least not the one she left in. This one was slightly oversized with a different cut. She said she borrowed it from a coworker because the office had been cold, that it was too chilly in the venue, and her original jacket was locked in someone's car. She handed it to me absent-mindedly, then disappeared into the bathroom. Smelled like cologne, woodsy, musky. Not hers. Not mine. Not unfamiliar. And that was the moment that hit me hardest. 'Cause suddenly it all came back. The jokes she used to make about her boss, Marcus. About how he's always trying too hard. How he wears cologne like it's armor. She'd said it laughing, dismissively. But now that same scent was on her jacket. I told myself I was being paranoid. That I was reading into everything. That I was manufacturing guilt where there was none. But there's a difference between suspicion and intuition. And what I felt then wasn't a guess. It was recognition. Somewhere along the line, Lena had started drifting. And I'd been too busy trusting her to realize it. I thought about the last time we were truly connected. Not just existing side by side, but present. Engaged. I couldn't remember it exactly. It blurred into an older version of us. Weekend breakfasts, her feet on my lap while we watched bad movies, spontaneous road trips just to chase sunsets. That version of Lena, the one who used to giggle at my stupid impressions and text me just to say she missed me, felt like a ghost. Now she was someone I barely recognized. Now she came home smelling like another man's cologne and offered jokes instead of explanations. And maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I was connecting dots that didn't belong together. But in my gut, I knew. I knew the shoes weren't just shoes. I knew the new perfume wasn't random. I knew the silence between us wasn't just exhaustion. It was distance. Manufactured. Maintained. And widening by the day. The hardest part wasn't the suspicion. It was the memory of how sure I used to be. How certain I was that Lena was incapable of this kind of deceit. That she was different. Loyal. Unshakable. But now I wasn't sure of anything. Except one thing. Whatever this was, it wasn't over. Not even close. The invite came on a Wednesday. Slipped casually into our dinner conversation. I was stirring pasta. She was scrolling on her phone. And the news dropped like it was just another item on her to-do list. By the way, Lena said, there's another work event Friday night. This one's co-ed, so you should come. I blinked. You want me to come? She looked up from her phone, a little too quick to smile. Well, yeah. I mean, people keep asking about you. That was new. Lately, she'd made it sound like every gathering was too dull for a spouse. You sure this one's not just the team again? She smirked, tossed her hair behind her ear. Nope. Totally appropriate for husbands. The word landed strange in my ears. Husbands. Not you. I watched her as she returned to scrolling. She wasn't nervous, exactly. But something was calculated in how casually she was playing it. Maybe she was trying to throw me off. Or maybe she wanted to prove something. Either way, I agreed to go. Friday came fast. Too fast. I got off work early, stood in front of the mirror longer than usual, changed shirts twice. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. But I didn't want to look like the clueless guy in the corner either. Lena was already dressed when I came downstairs. Black dress, off the shoulder. More revealing than anything I'd seen her wear in months. You look? I trailed off, trying to find the right words. She turned, applying lipstick in the mirror. Don't say tired. I was gonna say sharp. Confident. She smirked. Good. That's what I'm going for. The venue was one of those downtown hotels with chandeliers and overpriced cocktails. Everything inside gleamed. Polished marble, gold trim, velvet chairs. It didn't feel like a work event. It felt like a wedding someone forgot to book a bride for. We stepped in together, but it only took minutes for Lena to drift. She introduced me to a couple coworkers, then excused herself to greet someone else. And then another. Then another. I stood by the bar, nursing a drink that tasted like ginger and regret, watching her laugh across the room with people I'd never met. She didn't come back. She didn't look for me. I didn't follow her right away. I wanted to see where she went naturally, without my shadow changing her path. That's when I saw him. Tall. late 40s. The kind of posture that comes with power and years of never being challenged. Marcus, her boss. I recognized him from their website. Square jaw. Silver at the temples. Confident in the way men are when they're used to people laughing at things that aren't funny. And there she was, Lena, standing close. Too close. One hand on his arm. Her body angled toward him like they were in a whisper. Not a crowded ballroom. She laughed. He touched her waist. And then, God help me. She leaned in and kissed him. Not on the mouth. Not quite. But it wasn't friendly either. It lingered. Just a second too long. Just enough to make it clear this wasn't new. Something cracked in me. I didn't storm over. Didn't make a scene. I froze. Not in panic. In clarity. Everything clicked into place like a lock turning open. That's when she saw me. She blinked, startled, like she'd forgotten I existed. Her hand dropped from Marcus's chest. She stepped back half a beat, smiled a little too wide. I didn't move. I didn't smile back. And that's when someone else stepped into my line of sight. Hey! A voice said gently, You're Jake, right? I turned. She was shorter than Lena, maybe early 30s. Blonde, but not bright. More sandy, natural. Hair cropped just below the ears. She wore a simple blazer, no jewelry, but carried herself like someone who'd walked through fire and wasn't afraid of smoke anymore. I'm Rachel, she said. I know who you are. I also know what you just saw. I stared at her. She didn't flinch. Want to dance? She asked, like it was the most normal thing in the world. Dance? She nodded toward the other end of the ballroom. We can talk without being obvious. Trust me. It's better than standing here trying not to fall apart. I hesitated, then followed. We moved slowly, just enough to look like we were participating. Her hand rested lightly on my shoulder. Mine barely grazed her waist. You're not crazy, she said. Just loud enough for me to hear over the music. You're not imagining it. I didn't answer. She kept going. You saw what you saw. You felt it because it's real. I swallowed hard. How do you know? Because it happened to me too, she said. Different guy. Same story. Same company. My head tilted. You work with her? I used to. Marcus was my boss too. I left 2 months ago. Why? Her lips tightened. Because I told the truth. And the truth didn't fit into their version of loyalty. The song changed, something slower. She didn't pull away. You're not alone, she said. That's why I came over. You needed to hear that. I blinked back whatever was rising in my chest. Thank you, I managed. She gave a small nod. You want out of this room? More than anything. We left the ballroom without anyone noticing. Outside, the air was sharp and clean, like it had been filtered through steel. We didn't talk right away. Just stood there, side by side, watching the city lights blink in the distance. Then Rachel said, What you do next is up to you. But don't let them convince you you're crazy. That's the first thing they do. Make you question what you saw. I'm not questioning it anymore, I said quietly. She glanced sideways at me. Good. That means you're already ahead of where I was. We stood in silence again. Then she reached into her purse and handed me a card. No logo, just her name, her number. If you need someone who's already lived through this, she said, call me. I won't judge. I won't tell you what to do. I'll just tell you what I wish someone had told me. I took the card, held it like a lifeline. She walked away without waiting for a reply. Back inside, the party was still going strong. Lena was probably laughing again, or pretending not to scan the crowd for me. I didn't go back in. I didn't even look through the glass doors. I just stood under the night sky, clutching that card. The sound of Lena's laugh still echoing in my mind like the last note of a song I didn't want to hear anymore. The house didn't feel like home anymore. Felt like a stage. Over the next few days, Lena acted like nothing had happened. Like the Friday night party, the music, the drinks, the moment I saw her with Marcus, had been just another office function. She never brought it up. Not once. She smiled in the mornings, made me coffee, scrolled her phone beside me on the couch at night like we were a couple in a toothpaste commercial. Except I didn't believe a word of it. She'd always been a good liar. Not in the obvious way, no wild stories, no dramatic over-explanations. No, Lena's version of lying was smooth, subtle. She dodged truth like it was traffic. Casual swerves that made her deception feel almost polite. But I saw her now. I saw everything. And that changed how I saw everything else. She started texting more often. Her phone never left her side. I'd walk into the room and she'd flip it face down without looking up, like it was habit. Once, I caught a glimpse of the screen, Marcus's name. She tilted the phone so fast I almost laughed. She didn't even try to make it believable anymore. Just kept pretending I wouldn't notice. The part that hit hardest wasn't the lie itself. It was the way she carried it. The ease. Like I didn't matter enough to even fear discovery. Like I was already in the rearview mirror, too far back to see what was coming next. And yet, when I got home Monday evening, there was takeout on the counter. My favorite, Thai from the place across town. 2 beers in the fridge. The table was even set. She kissed me when I walked in. I barely blinked. She talked about her day, asked me how work was, told me I looked tired. Her voice was warm. Her eyes were gentle. Her hand brushed mine when she passed me the rice. She was perfect. Too perfect. A disguise. I realized, somewhere between the curry and the awkward silence, that she wasn't trying to reconnect. She was covering tracks. She wasn't sorry. She was strategic. I wanted to ask her, what were you thinking when you invited me to that party? Did you expect me to ignore what I saw? Did you think I'd buy it? That I'd let it go? But I didn't ask, because I didn't want her answers. I already knew they wouldn't be real. So I waited, watched, tracked the rhythm of her days, how her lies moved like clockwork. And that's when Rachel texted me again. Hey, just checking in. No pressure. Just. I know what those first few days feel like. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. Thanks. It's like being awake inside a dream. I can't tell what's real anymore. That's exactly how it starts, she wrote. But it gets clearer. You just have to stop believing their version of the story. Her version of the story. That phrase stuck with me, because Lena had built a version of our life. A filtered, polished narrative where I was still the clueless, supportive husband and she was still the overworked, emotionally exhausted career woman trying her best. But I wasn't buying it anymore. Not after what I'd seen. Not with what I felt. Rachel offered to meet. Not in a dramatic way, no parking lot rendezvous or trenchcoat whispers. Just a public place, neutral ground. Cafe she liked, outside the city. I've been where you are, she said when we sat down. The version of Marcus you saw at that party? That's the one he lets people see. But the real version, that one operates in private. I didn't speak, just listened. He's got this system, she continued. He builds emotional loyalty first, makes you feel special, chosen. And then the lines blur. And then suddenly, you're staying late for projects that never existed and taking phone calls you can't talk about at home. My jaw tightened. You too, she nodded. For 9 months. I swallowed. Why'd you leave? Rachel looked out the window. Because I stopped pretending I was the exception. That I was the one he'd actually choose. I realized I was just the newest story, not the last. I shifted in my seat. Do you think Lena? I think you already know. The silence between us said more than either of us could. She reached into her bag and slid a manila envelope across the table. I didn't plan to bring this, she said. But after Friday night, I thought you might need it. I opened it slowly. Inside were printouts, screenshots of messages, calendar invites, even photos. Lena was in a few. Always professional looking, but always. Near him, close. Another showed a car service receipt. One message was from Marcus, timestamped 11:42 p.m. on a Wednesday. Thanks for tonight. You always help me decompress. Couldn't breathe. Rachel leaned back. I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing it because the company won't protect you. HR already knows. They've buried worse. So why tell me? Because someone should, she said simply. And because I would have given anything for someone to tell me sooner. The truth felt like a freefall, and somehow a lifeline at the same time. I drove home in silence, the envelope on the passenger seat like a bomb that hadn't gone off yet. When I walked through the door, Lena was on the couch, watching a show she used to make fun of. "Hey," she said, looking up. "You're late." I stopped for gas. She smiled. "Everything okay?" I stared at her for a long second, then nodded. "Yeah," I said. "Everything's becoming clearer." The envelope sat on my desk like a lit fuse. I didn't open it again that night. I didn't have to. The damage was already done. I'd seen enough in that cafe to shatter any remaining illusion. Lena wasn't just drifting. She wasn't confused. She wasn't tempted or lost or going through some vague identity crisis. She was gone. Mentally, emotionally, she had left our marriage months ago. Maybe longer. What remained now was performance, habit, optics. A script she kept reciting in hopes I wouldn't notice she'd already left the stage. The next morning, I woke up before her. Made coffee. Ate toast I couldn't taste. I watched her walk into the kitchen in her robe, yawning like nothing had changed. And maybe in her mind nothing had. But in mine, everything was different. I was done waiting for her to trip up. I had the truth in my hands. Now I just had to figure out what to do with it. Rachel texted around noon. "Let me know if you want help with the next step. I still have contacts." I stared at the message for a long time before responding. "What kind of contacts?" Her reply came almost instantly. "People inside the company. People who've seen this happen before. One of them works in legal. Quiet but reliable." I hesitated, then typed, "Let's talk." We met again the next day, this time at a quiet library cafe tucked into a business park near the edge of town. Neutral ground. No chance of running into anyone from Lena's orbit. Rachel brought her laptop, a flash drive, and a notepad filled with dates, names, and initials. "This is the part they don't see coming," she said, "because they assume no one will fight back." What exactly are we fighting? She slid the flash drive across the table. A culture, a chain of favors, an unspoken understanding. I plugged the drive into my laptop and opened the folder. There were spreadsheets, company retreat rosters, private invite calendars, overlapping travel expenses that never showed up on the official books. Everything lined up a little too neatly. Lena was in multiple files. So was Marcus. So were two other women I didn't recognize. And Rachel. All of us were brought in the same way, she said, flipping through her notes. Late meetings, special projects, exclusive off-site events. First, it feels like opportunity, access. Then it shifts. The boundaries blur. It's not just about the job anymore, it's about the access you're willing to give. My throat tightened. Why would they keep records? They don't mean to, she said. But calendar apps do. Expense reports do. Meeting invites do. You just have to know where to look. She pointed to a list of names. I've already given this to internal legal. Quietly. But they're slow. They like to pretend it's not urgent. That it's hearsay. That everything is consensual and professional. Until someone makes noise outside the walls. I looked up. You want me to be the noise. I want you to protect yourself, she said, voice softening. Because when this comes out, and it will, you don't want to be the guy who knew but stayed silent. Especially if you're still tied to her when it breaks. The air between us got still. I nodded. I'll take care of it. That night, Lena was on the couch when I got home, reading a report on her tablet. She looked up, smiled. Hey, long day? I nodded. Yours? Same, she said, stretching. Back-to-back meetings. Marcus is pushing hard before the quarter ends. I let her words hang. No reaction. Just took a long sip of water and walked upstairs. By Thursday, Rachel's contact in legal, Danielle, had quietly forwarded a confidential packet to the board. It included everything, the calendars, the messages, the inconsistencies in expense reports. Lena's name appeared 13 times. Marcus's, 32. By Friday, the HR department had been alerted. By Monday, there was an internal audit. Lena had no idea. She still packed her lunch like always. Still tied her hair back in that low twist she wore when she wanted to look in control. Still kissed me on the cheek before she left. Like nothing in her world was unraveling. But it was. And she was walking into it blind. On Tuesday evening, she came home pale. Not sick. Unnerved. She stood in the doorway longer than usual. Coat still buttoned. Keys in hand. I looked up from my laptop. "You good?" I asked. She nodded. "Too fast. Just weird day." I waited. She dropped her bag by the stairs, took off her coat, and finally looked at me. "HR called a meeting this afternoon." My pulse didn't change. "About?" She hesitated. "Someone filed a report. About work culture. Power dynamics. Marcus specifically." I blinked. "That's serious." "Yeah," she said, sitting down slowly. "They said it was anonymous. But they're reviewing everything now. Messages, meetings, travel. They asked if I ever felt pressured." My silence was deafening. She looked at me, eyes searching. "I said no," she added, almost defensively. "Because I didn't. Not really. It wasn't, he didn't make me do anything. It was complicated." There it was. The crack. The slippage between her version and reality. "I mean," she went on, "if I'd said no, he would have backed off, I think." "You think?" She flinched. "I don't know," she whispered. "Maybe not." Her voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. And suddenly, for just a second, I saw the fear. Not guilt. Not shame. Fear. Because for the first time, she wasn't in control of the narrative. And she knew it. That night, I waited until she fell asleep. Then I took out the envelope again. This time, I read everything. The messages. The timestamps. The receipts. The documentation of just how many times she left me in the dark while she claimed to be somewhere else. While she was someone else. I stared at a message from Marcus that read, "Hotel confirmed for next week. Same room. You know the drill." It was dated 4 weeks before the heels showed up in our bedroom. I closed my eyes. That was the night she came home late, said her meeting ran long. I remembered hugging her at the door and wondering why her makeup looked so fresh, why her perfume lingered like she'd just reapplied. I remembered telling myself not to ask questions. I remembered choosing trust. And now I was choosing clarity. She came home shaking, holding a folder. No words, no explanations. Fired. Everything unraveled faster than she could lie. She blamed Marcus, HR, the system. Then, finally, me. Said it started as power, not love. Said she lost control. I didn't argue. I slid the divorce papers across the table. Already signed. She stared at them, then sat on the floor, whispering, "I didn't think it would end like this." A week later, Rachel knocked on my door. Fired for speaking up, suitcase in hand. She didn't ask to stay. Just walked in and said she had nowhere else to go. I didn't promise anything. Just showed her where the coffee was and sat beside her. There was no romance, no future plan. Just two people who refused to lie anymore. Sometimes the truth wrecks everything. But sometimes that wreck is where something real finally begins.